Levelling Up Housing and Communities Secretary Michael Gove was wrong to block plans by Marks & Spencer to demolish and redevelop its store near Marble Arch in London's West End. Mr Gove blocked the proposals in July last year on the grounds that they failed to support the transition to a low-carbon future and did not encourage the reuse of existing resources. But the High Court this morning found for M&S on 5 of the 6 counts it brought and said Mr Gove's decision was unlawful. UK manufacturing activity continued to contract last month, according to a closely followed survey published this morning. The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index for February, in which anything above 50 represents growth and anything below that a contraction, came in at 47.5. It was the 12th consecutive month in which the survey has pointed to a contraction in manufacturing activity. Well, the figure, up from 47 in January, was, however, the best reading since April last year. Joining me now is Chris Williamson. He's Chief Business Economist at S&P Global Market Intelligence. Chris, good morning to you. I mean, it looks very much as though the crisis in the Red Sea is having a big impact on manufacturers.
Indeed, it is, yeah. So another month of manufacturing decline, and what we've seen so far this year is a gathering impact of those Red Sea disruptions, the Houthi attacks on vessels, causing those ships to be rerouted around Africa instead of going through the Suez Canal. It's adding time to supply chains, which means, of course, things are costing more. And that's feeding through to an increase in manufacturing costs, which they're then passing through to their selling prices as well, which is precisely what the Bank of England doesn't want to be seeing at the moment.
Indeed so. It's not just a question of delays in the supply chain. I mean, orders are also falling.
Orders are falling. Yeah, we've seen this trending for quite a while now. This is domestic and export orders are in contraction across manufacturing. It's really going through a tough phase at the moment. But this is more of a global phenomenon. There's weak trade. After the pandemic, we saw a lot of spending shift from goods to services once economies reopened. And there's still a tailwind of that that's causing us to spend more on services than goods. So UK manufacturing, it's a very globally exposed sector, lots of trade, and we're suffering with that headwind still.
Absolutely. I mean, you have published other purchasing PMI data, manufacturing PMI data this morning as well. Put the UK into context with the rest of the world.
Well, certainly in the context of Europe, we're kind of somewhere in the middle. Some European economies are returning to growth already. Likes of the more Mediterranean countries. Germany is faring worse than anyone, really. It's going through a big structural shift. It was relying on very cheap energy from Russia, and the Ukraine war has caused it to have to resource its energy. And it's never going to be as cheap as it was before. So whole swathes of German industry are having to restructure, really. And this is going to take a very long time, causing Germany to be what some people are saying, the sick man of Europe. Hopefully it won't be for too long, but certainly in the meantime, it's really struggling. But other economies, some starting to pick up. There is a sign that the Red Sea impact really was at its worst in January, and we're now seeing some alleviation of that in some economies. So it does look like this is a short-term spell. Once ships get back to their normal routines, then this shouldn't last too long and shouldn't be too inflationary. But in the meantime, the UK is suffering disproportionately from those attacks.
Chris, you also highlight weakness in manufacturing employment. I mean, that is obviously a lagging indicator normally. Would you see any sort of positive signs on the horizon there?
It was a very worrying weak number in February for the UK manufacturing payroll numbers. The firms are under great pressure to reduce their costs. This is largely cost-cutting related. Some signs of skill shortages, which have been keeping job growth down in some firms. But across the board, this is a real focus on how do we keep our costs low? How do we maintain competitiveness in this quite aggressive global environment they're in at the moment? So in that respect, that global environment may be picking up a little bit, but those competitive forces are going to stay there for some time. And so there's a long way to go until the UK manufacturing sector really comes back as a strong job creator, I think.
OK, Chris, we have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some other business news stories for you now. Ryanair confirmed this morning it will be putting on fewer flights during the peak summer months this year than previously expected. Europe's biggest airline said this was because Boeing would be delivering just 40 of the 57 planned 737 MAX aircraft due to be delivered before the end of June. It said it had already implemented schedule cuts as a result, including airports such as Dublin, Milan, Malpensa, Warsaw Modlin and 4 Portuguese airports. Michael O'Leary, the Ryanair chief executive, said he was very disappointed, but said Boeing continues to have Ryanair's wholehearted support. ITV has sold its 50% stake in the digital subscription streaming service BritBox International to its joint venture partner BBC Studios for £255 million. BritBox International was launched by the pair in the United States in 2017, showing old and new episodes of British TV series such as Coronation Street and Doctor Who. Carolyn McCall, the ITV chief executive, said the sale would allow ITV to focus on the ITVX streaming service and growing ITV Studios. BritBox UK is unaffected by the sale. Shares of ITV, which will return all the sale proceeds to shareholders, have risen 13% on the news. The board of logistics company Wincanton has recommended shareholders accept a takeover from US company GXO, the owner of the UK's Clipper Logistics. It comes a day after GXO tabled its £762 million offer, trumping a previous deal agreed with the board with the French company CMA CGM, valuing Wincanton at £605 million. Shares of Wincanton have been trading hands this morning at £6.22 each. That's a premium to the 605p being offered by GXO and implying that investors expect an increased offer. Continued strong demand for its English language learning courses has helped Pearson raise full-year operating profits on an adjusted basis to £573 million. That was up 26% on 2022. The world's biggest education publishing company said its English language learning sales were up 30% during the year, driven by stronger demand for English tests in Australia and India in particular. Pearson, whose publishing brands include Longman and Addison Wesley Professional, also cited sales growth in its assessment and qualifications business, which includes the Edexcel examining board. The shares have risen by as much as 4.5% this morning. House prices rose on a year-on-year basis last month for the first time in more than a year, according to Nationwide Building Society. The UK's second largest mortgage lender said house prices in February were up 0.7% from January. On a year-on-year basis, prices were up 1.2% on February last year, which Nationwide said was the first year-on-year growth recorded since January 2023. It said house prices were now around 3% below the all-time highs recorded in the summer of 2022. All of which will come as of interest to Rightmove, the UK's biggest property portal. The FTSE 100 company today reported an underlying operating profit of £264.6 million for 2023. That was up 8% on 2022. Well, joining me now is Rightmove's chief executive, Johan Svanstrom. Johan, welcome to you. You grew sales by 10% during the year. Given that the market was pretty subdued, I assume that all came from pricing.
Well, actually, we operate a platform where we provide products to the market that really works in very different types of market conditions. So that's how we sort of gear the business. And there's opportunity to use our products and pay for them when market is strong, and equally when the market is a little bit weaker. And that's what we saw the results of last year. Lots of good execution and indeed innovation on our product set.
You make the point in the statement that the time it takes for a seller to find a buyer last year was 59 days, up from 37 in 2022. What have you been seeing so far this year?
The levels are still elevated, but once you remember that lower number was coming from this sort of extremely fast markets of 21 and 22 post the pandemic. So it's actually back to much more normal levels right now. Generally speaking, the sentiment towards end of 23 and beginning of 24, just like you quoted here from Nationwide, has been much more positive. So listings are up 18%, sales agreed are up 16%, and demand is coming back. There's clearly a pent-up demand from both buyers and sellers from some of the hesitations of last year due to the higher financing costs.
What sort of increases would you expect to see in the UK housing market this year?
Well, we think it's going to be slightly more positive than last year. So last year we saw about 1 million house transactions happening, and we predict roughly 1.1. So again, tracking into a much better trajectory on the anticipation, of course, of economy improving steadily and the inflation coming down.
Now, competition's about to get a bit tougher for you because your US equivalent CoStar has just bought on the market. How are you bracing yourself for an added blast of competition?
Well, competition is always around in one or another form, and this company has seen quite a few competitors over time. So one has to respect and frankly welcome competition. We are very set on our strategy, which we announced end of last year, actually, where we are really doubling down, investing in our technology platform, deepening our relationship with the consumers. We have an enormous advantage in terms of the scale, full visibility of the market, well over 80% of market share, and lots of people coming directly to Rightmove. So we're just expanding and deepening the products that we offer to both consumers and customers, and we think that's the best strategy for us going forward.
Now, we have a budget on Wednesday next week. Are you hopeful that the Chancellor will do anything to stimulate housing activity?
Indeed, I think many of us are. We have a couple of fairly concrete proposals. We think that the government can do more in terms of stamp duty relief. There is some relief in the market already, but that's set to expire in 25. We think they can look at regional differences because the relief strikes very differently depending on the price levels of housing. There's more to do in terms of mortgage schemes, right? Very, very few people today get help from these sort of 95 or until yesterday proposed 99% mortgages. So there's more to do on that side. And then there's another piece which is around helping from a financial perspective or with grants, the generally sort of the green transition of the industry, right? There's a lot of landlords who actually want to renovate their properties today. There are homeowners who want to do it, but it's costly. And that would be, we think, a perfect alignment between doing something better and much needed for the planet, and at the same time actually get more quality and more people into houses.
OK, Johan, we have to leave it there. Busy day for your results day. We do appreciate you sparing the time to chat. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you.
Well, gains on Wall Street last night were followed by a positive session for stocks in the Asia-Pacific region. The standout performer was the Nikkei in Tokyo, up nearly 2% to another all-time high. Well, in Europe, stocks have also started the new month largely positively. The CAC 40 letting the side down a bit in Paris there. Talking points today include Daimler Truck. That's up 14% in Frankfurt on a better-than-expected trading update. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 has also caught the wind, and that is up in a broad-based rally just now. The leading blue-chip gainer in percentage terms, mentioned them a moment ago, Pearson. Shares currently up more than 3.5% to the good there. To the downside, the industrial equipment group IMI is off just over 1%. That's also reporting today. Outside the FTSE 100, well, I mentioned them earlier as well. ITV, currently the leading gainer, up just under 14% just now. Well, Close Brothers, which you can see on the screen right now, well, that continues to attract speculative buying. It's currently up another 7.5%. Very, very weak lately on the car finance investigation by the FCA. On the foreign exchange markets, well, we had the US inflation numbers yesterday. Sterling's recaptured a few of the losses it notched up against the dollar yesterday, currently up 1/6 against the greenback. It's unchanged against the euro. Single currency slightly ahead right now against the dollar. As for the oil price, well, that has clawed back some of its losses from earlier this week ahead of this weekend's meeting of the OPEC Plus cartel. I think the oil price will still finish down on the week, though. Barrel of Brent crude currently changing hands at $83.20 a barrel. That's up a little over 1.5% on the session. Well, joining me this morning is Sophie Lund-Yates, lead equity analyst, of course, at Hargreaves, Lansdown. Sophie, good to see you this morning. Let's start with Rightmove. We've just been speaking to the CEO there. What did you make of the numbers?
Hi there. Yes, I would actually call this a pretty robust set of numbers, really. You know, that double-digit rise in revenue, which is, of course, testament to the fact that the truth is, if you want to advertise a property these days, chances are you need to put that on Rightmove if you are an estate agent. And really, quite crucially, in terms of the number that we'd always be looking at where Rightmove is concerned, is that operating margin. You know, these are well north of 70%. Yes, they're expected to cool down a little bit in the coming year, but you know, we're looking at those kind of numbers and profitability levels. Really, you can't call this anything but robust.
Now, this time yesterday, Sophie, I was speculating on air about the relationship between Ocado and Marks and Spencer and this payment that Ocado may receive from M&S if it's hit targets, its joint venture. Well, we don't think that they've hit it. There's a bit of a row brewing here, isn't there?
There absolutely is. So Ocado has essentially threatened legal action because M&S is, as things stand, withholding this payment of in the region of £200 million because those undisclosed targets apparently have not been met. Now, when you look at this, not only, when you start talking about litigation potential, there are concerns around what this is going to mean financially for the parties involved. But when you strip this away to the grocery market, I'm looking at this wondering what it might mean for the joint venture moving forward. Souring of relations in this way means M&S might be looking for other ways to boost its food business. Of course, the footprint there a lot smaller than other players in the game, and Ocado played a big part in that strategy. So a lot to monitor from that perspective.
I find it absolutely stunning, this, Sophie. I mean, what on earth do Ocado think they're playing at, threatening a joint venture partner with litigation? It's a terrible look.
It's certainly not the standard state of play. You're absolutely right, and a lot of the language that's been used has been pretty direct, pretty blunt, and certainly I think we are looking at potentially irreparable damage to the relationship, and of course the outcomes of that very much up in the air. But yeah, as you say, really quite a shocking turn of events.
Yeah, not good at all. Now, the other big corporate story of the day today is ITV selling BritBox International. It's stake there.
Yes, so a much cheered kind of shot in the arm for the ITV share price this morning. So it's announced that it's selling its 50%, well, its entire interest in BritBox International, that's international streaming product. Now, really, the market's quite relieved at this because actually what it means is that the group is going to be more refocused on boosting its ad-supported streaming business, that's ITVX, as well as its international studios business, where it actually produces productions for other people. And that buyback as well means that investors are actually going to be a little bit more rewarded for their patience as they work to try and unpick themselves from this structural decline in broadcast advertising revenue. A lot of work to be done, but the market is pretty excited by this £235 million cash injection that the business is going to get.
OK, Sophie, we have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. We're just going to hop across to Moscow now to show you the latest pictures from Alexei Navalny's funeral. These are the pictures of his coffin leaving the church, as you can see. Just to warn you, we will be showing you in just a second an open casket there. Those pictures are about to come up. That is the first picture we have seen from inside the church where the funeral of the opposition campaigner Alexei Navalny has been held this morning. More on that after this short break.
This is it was a bit of a Goldilocks moment for us. So we've been studying the marlins for a number of years now, interested in how they hunt. So marlins are a really fascinating fish in that they're usually solitary, but every year off the coast of Mexico, they flock there towards the sardines and they basically hunt in packs in the same way that sort of lions or wolves do it. But the thing that's super interesting about marlins is they're usually by themselves. So there's no central coordination or alpha or anything like that. So we've been interested in how they hunt, and for a while we've been trying to work out how they coordinate those hunts. And it wasn't until we sort of had this perfect Goldilocks conditions of these flat seas, no wind, that we really saw this brightening, lighting up as they go into attack. And what we think is happening is that they're actually either signaling to their mates to back off, because obviously they've got a big weapon on their face, they don't want to damage it. But also it could just be sort of their excitement that they're going into hunt. So it was a pretty exciting thing to see. So we've known that they've been able to light up for years. Ask any fisherman, they'll be able to tell you that pretty quickly. But we always thought it was a bit of an excitement response, so almost like getting flushed or blushing in humans, getting excited and just getting brighter. But what we think is it's pretty clear that it's targeted towards actually hunting, which is pretty cool. So we film off Baja on the Pacific side of the Baja coast off Mexico. So, and that's a really perfect place for them. The seas are calm, it's beautiful and clear, and we get these huge aggregations of them. So that's really the perfect place to see it. It's what's known as the sardine run of Mexico. So And thankfully, we haven't seen any sharks there. So it's a little bit safer, I guess, to jump in the water as opposed to some other places around the world. So it's quite nice over there.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380.
Welcome back. We are just going to break into the business move to bring you the latest pictures that we have from Moscow, where obviously the opposition leader Alexei Navalny's funeral has been taking place this morning. As you've just seen in the last few minutes, Alexei Navalny's coffin has just left the church. There is a very, very heavy police presence there. There was quite a battle between Alexei Navalny's family and the authorities over the release of his body after his still unexplained death in an Arctic penal colony. We are told that several churches in Moscow actually refused to hold the service before Mr. Navalny's team received permission from one in the capital's Marin district, where Alexei Navalny lived before his 2020 poisoning, his treatment in Germany and his subsequent arrest on his return to Russia. The church that has been hosting Alexei Navalny's service is the Church of the Icon of the Mother of God, Soothe My Sorrows. As you can see from the pictures we've been showing, there have been crowd control barriers. Interestingly, we understand that the church did not mention the service on its social media page, but obviously there are hundreds and hundreds of people waiting outside the church there, and of course they're being watched by the police who have been deployed there in very, very big numbers. We are told a number of Western diplomats who are spotted in the line as well. These are the latest picture. Very brave, these people, obviously, because anyone seen publicly mourning for Alexei Navalny, those who've been laying wreaths and tributes to Alexei Navalny in the wake of his, as I say, still unexplained death. Many of them have been arrested, and we understand even in some cases where they are young men, they've been sent to the front in Ukraine. So very, very harsh treatment indeed. So very, very brave people, these attending the service. This is a live shot now of the cemetery where Mr. Navalny will be buried. There has been live stream footage, and there was a lot of cheering and support of Alexei Navalny at the time as he left the church there. It's very interesting to note the Kremlin has publicly urged people gathering outside the church not to break the law. And Dmitry Peskov, he, of course, is the Kremlin spokesman, someone that we've heard a lot of times from over the last 2 years since Putin invaded Ukraine. He has been saying publicly today that any unauthorized gatherings are violations. The burial, as I say, due to take place shortly. That's at the nearby Borisovskoye cemetery. And again, there are police very much in force there. We haven't actually seen, I don't think, pictures of Mr. Navalny's mother, Lyudmila Navalny, who, of course, spent 8 days trying to get the authorities to release Mr. Navalny's body after his unexplained death on the 16th of February. Our diplomatic editor, correspondent Alex Rossi, is with me now. Alex, what more can you say just now?
Well, certainly this is an extremely sad day, not just for Alexei Navalny's family, but also people who wanted to see a more open and transparent Russia. Alexei Navalny was really seen as a hope, really, for the opposition, somebody who could bring freedom to the country. And he did that in very, very unique ways, bearing in mind that the repression inside Russia under the regime of Vladimir Putin has been building and becoming much tighter over recent years, much more so since the Ukraine war. But really, this kind of figurehead who would lead that opposition is now no more. He's being buried today in Moscow. And I think the thing about Alexei Navalny, which was so unique, is he was a very charismatic figure. But the way in which he managed to connect, particularly with younger Russians, is something I think which really was caused great fear inside the Kremlin. Social media videos exposing the corruption which went to the very top, right up to Vladimir Putin. The amount of money that they plundered, the kleptocracy which modern Russia had become. So really, I think people will be looking around now, certainly those people who wanted to see a more open and possibly even democratic Russia emerging will be looking around to see who there is, but it's hard to see who could possibly replace Alexei Navalny. So an extremely sad day, not just for the family, not just for mourners, but people who wanted to see a more liberal Russia emerging.
Alex, thanks for that. We're watching at the moment live pictures now. It appears that some of the crash barriers that the authorities put in place have been knocked over as people try to get closer to the funeral cortege and perhaps maybe try and throw a flower or in the direction of Alexei Navalny's coffin. As I say, we understand he will be buried fairly shortly. That's it from now. I am back with Business Live at 4:30 this afternoon. We will have much more on the funeral of Alexei Navalny in the next hour here on Sky News after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
This is Sky News Today. It is 12 o'clock. Here are the headlines. A final farewell 2 weeks after his death. Alexei Navalny's funeral takes place as riot police gather near the church. We'll be live in Moscow, where the funeral service has just taken place as